Hello, I said I was going to do CPALMS video, and here it is. I'll try and keep it quick and short. You're first going to go to Google. You're going to click in here. You're going to type in CPALMS. It's your first option. You're going to click on this. This is going to take you to the home page. So you're going to have access to, as a teacher, as a parent, as a student, so you can take the initiative and look at, if you're a parent and you want to look and see what's available, there are student tutorials, videos, resources, all that information. You can look at those independently. If you're a student, you can go to floridastudents.org. That will take you directly to the lessons themselves. But this is the home page. What you're going to do is you're going to click on Standards, which I already did. So you're going to click on Standards. Here you're going to have the option to put in your subject, put in your grade level, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to scroll to give you an idea of what's available here in terms of subject areas. Okay, if you notice, there aren't specifics. Like for math, you don't see algebra or any of that stuff. English, you're not going to have English 1, 2, 3, 4. So I use math as my example for the syllabus, and if you haven't had a chance to look at the video that I did on how to get your syllabus from the public school system, or if you can reach out to your teacher and get the syllabus for the year or your district, find out where you can get that from. Why? Because you can utilize these two resources to manage your students' math, reading, social studies, science. You can manage all of their coursework. Well, actually, I should say that their coursework will be much more manageable because you have access to those two resources. And this is what I mean by that. So I found the curriculum for Algebra 1, okay? So this is the fourth quarter. This is the coursework for this 9 weeks. These are the state standards, okay? You're going to use these state standards in CPALMS. So that was Algebra 1, Mathematics, but guess what? Everything is arranged by grade level. And I know that Algebra 1 is considered 9 to 12 because if you can get high school credit for it, it's going to be under the criteria for a high school. Even if you're in 7th or 8th grade, you can get high school credit. So the fact that you can get high school credit means you're going to find it under the high school grade levels, 9 through 12. Do you see here, algebra is mentioned a few times, but the majority of the information provided here utilizes different naming requirements, okay? So the way that this works is, this is your Math Florida Standard for grades 9 to 12. It's N stands for numbers, RN means the real number system. So it's numbers and quantities, real number system. So the coding that they use is supposed to make sense when you expand it out to the actual domain that they're supposed to be covering, or benchmark. In some instances, it will be a benchmark. So we had, as my example that I'm going to use, Algebra 1. Doesn't matter if it's Algebra 1. I'm looking for the standard. So Math 9 to 12, FIF 3.9. Okay, so I'm going to minimize this. So FIF 3.9. FIF, so these are the roots. They're not going to put the exact one because you have to expand it. So it's FIF 3.9, so this is the 3 right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this arrow key, and there we have FIF 3.9. So the last part of the lesson is a third step in this particular standard. So this one says it's got 14 resources. That's great and that's wonderful, but I also want you to know you have the option to do the read more. So if you click on this, it's going to give you a more detailed description of this particular standard. So it's all spelled out now. We know it's Algebra 1, Algebra 2, so this is something that's going to connect Algebra 1 to Algebra 2. Now it's going to give you an overview. So these are all the related lessons for this particular standard. But since it's incorporating Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 together, I don't want to spend too much time or get too involved with this here because this is general. This is general information. This is general information that's available. If you so desire looking at point 3, so this is not specific to the lesson, this is the 3 in general. So if you want to look at this standard as a whole and see how it builds, great, that's wonderful. You can do that. But for the purpose of this, I want to utilize and get straight to where I want to be. Now, unfortunately, when you do click on things, you have to go all the way back. So this is one thing that's not going to be streamlined. Every time you move forward and you have to go back to this main page, I highly suggest if you're clicking on something to just go ahead and open it up in a new window so that it can minimize having to go back and forth between things. So we were here. We're going to expand this. We're going to look at the 3 tiles made available. Now notice it says 14 resources. Keep an eye on that. So once you click on the standard, it is going to give you a description. So usually in the classroom or any kind of explanation of the standard in a textbook and everything, it's going to have this text. Compare properties of 2 functions, each represented in a different way, algebraically, graphically, numerically, in tables, or by verbal descriptions. And it's going to say, for example, given a graph of one quadratic function and an algebraic expression for another, say which has the larger maximum. So it's just letting you know that prior to getting to here, you're going to need to know how to represent functions algebraically, how to represent functions graphically, creating tables with it, and then verbal descriptions. That usually means in writing. It's going to be word problems or a description in writing that's going to include this information. So within the context of a problem that you're going to see, you'll have the verbal or word description that's going to go along with it. And then they'll provide you either a graph and or an algebraic equation, and then ask you what that relationship is. So who has more of this, or who went further, or who lasted longer. So you have to create a table. So the tables are important because if they're giving you an algebraic equation, you have to create an XY table to fill in, to create coordinates. Once you create the table to make the coordinates, you plot them in the graph. Then now that you have a graphic representation of what was done, you can utilize your algebra and your geometry technically. When you're dealing with a graph and you're graphing points, you're into geometry at this point. Even though it says Algebra 2, you still use aspects of geometry within Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So you're going to be graphing that and seeing what the relationship is, or answering the questions based on what your results are. So in a sense, this is connecting it to science in a way. So with all your core classes, they have to find a way to incorporate connections with other subject areas. So here you're going to see math and science close together. In fact, as you move up the math chain, the closer and closer to science, you'll see those connections. So it is important, or any type of science you might have available to you, physics, trigonometry, calculus type of things. They're going to show you connections in physics or experiments like chemistry and things like that, because you're going to have an outcome, a cause and effect. So anytime you're solving an equation in algebra, you are essentially performing an experiment, but you're also at the same time making a statement. You're using your language skills, believe it or not, to create your math problems, because you have to think in terms of words to create your math statements. Okay, I know that might not make sense to you, for those of you who've been out of math for a little bit, or maybe I just sound nutty to you, and this is like, who sees math problems as a statement? I want you to pay attention. Remember I told you there are 14 resources. Pay attention to that. Here are the 14 resources. You have it broken down into lesson plans, formative assessments, problem-solving tasks, other assessments, video, virtual manipulative, and then you have a unit/lesson sequence. This is more for teachers. So if I click on this, you're going to see how teachers are putting together. CMAP is a resource through CPALMS for teachers to create a lesson plan or to plan out their lessons according to what this syllabus is having them do. So they're going to organize their work the way that they have it for here. So so if we're dealing with this, we have 10 days to do this. So CMAPs can help them utilize the information within a time frame. So they have to be very particular. The lesson plans are exactly that. You're given, like I said, these are your verbals, right? So here we have our verbals. It's telling you within these lesson plans what the student is expected. Look at the way that the writing and terminology is organized. The students will explore. Students will compare. This lesson is intended to help you assess how well students are able to translate between graphs and algebraic representation. How well students are able to understand what difference algebraic forms of a quadratic function reveal. So this is all expectations for the students. This is what each of them are doing. So you can click on these and you can look at the lessons themselves to kind of better understand how this relates. And as you noticed, the same text is provided at the beginning of each lesson so that you can maintain consistency with and also focus for students. You can export this, you can print it, you can share it. So if you have other parents that are having difficulty staying on top of everything in their house in addition, and now you throw in they got to be the teacher too, by all means you can do that. It's going to give you the information. So see, like I was telling you, the science and math is being connected. It has your grade levels. It has what technology you need. So you need a computer, a calculator, Adobe or Microsoft, because you're going to end up downloading things, right? So beginning predictive formative assessment. So at the beginning of this lesson, you're going to be given an assessment. This is probably what I would call a pre-test. So based on what you know now, so if you go through this assessment, so you're going to go through this and you're going to answer these questions, or your student's going to answer these questions. All right. This is just to kind of see where the student is in their knowledge of information, okay? This isn't you need to know all this stuff and you have to know it before you get into the lesson. No, it's just like it says, a predictive thing. Let's see if you can figure out how to get to the answer or understand things. You have samples. So let's click on the sample representations. This is an Excel sheet. Like I said before, if this is in relation to tables, then you probably need to have Excel. So in the technology portion, Microsoft Office is not just Word. It obviously means you need Excel too. And while this is loading, so here we have the lesson itself. So we have tables and graphs. These are your x values. So if x equals 0, so you put x equals 0 here, you're going to plug in 0 into the equation, and then you're going to come up with a coordinate. Okay, so this is the sample, and then down here at the tabs you have an example and then a blank one. So I'm assuming that the teacher is expecting the students to provide their own example of what's going on here. So I would say you probably want to copy and paste the layout here and then change out numbers. This is the textual evidence. Remember I said you're going to need the verbal. Same as 20 meters from the motion detector. So you're going into the word problem. You're looking at the information displayed. Okay, so that's something that you may need to keep in mind. Furthermore, here is the lesson content, the learning objective. What should students know and be able to do as a result of this lesson? Here is the learning goal. This is on the dry erase board in the classroom. The teachers have to put on there what the learning goal is. So this is going to be the learning goal. The students will be able to compare properties of two functions. They're going to need to do all this. Before even doing the lesson, what prior knowledge does a student need to know? So here is where you look at your vocabulary. So have your students copy this, and I highly suggest, even though we are on digital learning and you're looking at these lessons, please have students write things down. When you are physically writing something down, copying information down, you are actively thinking, you're activating the brain in a way to prepare it to learn information, store it in the right places, and also be able to remember it, put it in the right memory bank so that they can recall it later, or at least when they go back to reference it, or they have visuals that are usually in coordinate with what's going on. And some of these lessons will have worksheets, so if you want to see, you'll see worksheets available in these lessons, just like up here. So as you click on the resources in the attachments area, you're going to have worksheets. This is just simply like you have your Word document, you have the Excel sheet. So we have different ways of looking at the assessments here and what's going on and how to display that. The guiding questions. So how can we mathematically represent speed in various forms? So here we know that we're going to be looking at movement. So you have an x, y value that you're going to have to be dealing with. X is your domain. So if it's been a while since school, if you see the word domain in anything, that means your x value. So you're moving horizontally from left to right. Your range is your y value. That's your up and down. So if whatever is moving is on an incline and then it is going down a hill, then you need to know that the speed is going to increase. So with your algebraic equation, you can determine how that is. And how is the direction of the moving object represented in various mathematical forms? So here's your y. So the speed, how fast something is, x. Y is, all right, now how is it moving up and down? How will the teacher present the concept or skill to students? This says students are grouped in fours based on their abilities. So here you're going to have, this is made to be a group assignment. Okay, and it's giving conditions to the teacher on what to do. and how they're supposed to do it. Look, the teacher will project the problem in the first question from the formative assessment, concealing the second and third questions. As the parent, you now know if you're going to look at this lesson, you need to only show the first problem, the first question, and leave the second and third questions hidden. Okay? So you're going to have 2 minutes to answer, so you even have a time limit. And then the teacher will debrief the formative assessment. So you're going to talk about the assessment itself. And then use the interactive board. The teacher will provide direct instruction on calculations of speed and y-intercept by analyzing verbal expressions. So a script has been attached. So you can click on this and look at the script. So you can even follow a script that the teacher themselves, well, a teacher will probably modify the script or word it in a way that they feel that the students will best understand, because with this being considered a cookie cutter kind of thing, you have to manipulate it in a way that all the students in all class periods are going to understand it. And here we have guided practice. What activities or exercises will the students complete with teacher guidance? So this is what is going to happen with the teacher. This is not independent work. So here's what's happening. 2.5 to 5 minutes each round, and there are 4 to 8 rounds. So if I kind of say, okay, well, they're going to spend 4 minutes, and there's 4 to 8 rounds. That's 16 to 32 minutes right here. So in their group, students will work to solve the problems using the following strategy. And this is what the expectation is for the students. So I would say as the parent, you probably want to highlight this and either print it out or write it on a sheet of paper. Do whatever you feel is necessary so that they understand. Now, if the percent of correct answers is below 70, the teacher will ask students to reconsider the question, repeating steps 1 through 3. So that same thing goes for your students. Okay, so you're going to be working with the partner. If you're not working as a group, then I would say if you can assist the student, or if you can find a way to digitally connect, have your students digitally connect with other students in the same class, or at least taking the same subject area. So if a friend is in a different school and they're doing Algebra 1, as long as they're doing Algebra 1, this might be something that you want to group them together and work together with. And then the same thing's going to happen with your second round. Now that they've learned how to do this with the help of others, it's time to perform this particular skill by themselves. They're going to have 5 to 10 minutes. And then they'll begin the elevator problem according to their comfort level with each form of representation. Student will complete value tables, graphs, and equations to represent the movement of each elevator. So they're working independently with the Word document or PDF that was provided in the attachment above. And then in closing, the teacher will assist students in organizing the knowledge gained in the lesson. So with all the work that's been going on, this means that with independent work, the teacher, or at least the person who created this lesson, and all teachers usually are going to see that since this is a new skill, they might not have it down packed because they're not organizing the work appropriately. Or maybe the reason why they're getting things wrong or not understanding things is because they're not following a process. They're not following steps that progress naturally and accordingly to what this is supposed to do. So then you're going to complete the summative assessment problem, and you're going to have 3 minutes. And then look, they have where you're going to do the summative assessment. Then they have the formative assessment. And then the suggested answers to formative assessment guiding questions. So you have the answers here. Accommodations. So if your child has an IEP, there are some accommodations. So if you're struggling with graphing, have a reminder card. ESOL students. Okay, so here we have expectations. We have our materials needed. So you have to read thoroughly through this. Okay. And then this lesson is likely to support student engagement with the following standards for mathematical practice. So here are some more standards. If you are struggling with understanding what's going on yourself, so before presenting this lesson to your child, or if they look at this and they're confused, they can go to these standards and review them. Go back and review them before approaching this particular topic, just to see and understand what skill sets are being reinforced that they've learned before. So anything that they're learning now is going to be built on a certain foundation. It's going to be built on a particular skill set that has already been developed. So they just need to figure out which one it is, if they haven't already, and then work their way through it. So once they do that, you can go into your next lesson. You can print that out, export it, like I said, have a digital representation, and then you can go into the next one, linear representation. So if we go here, and this one, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the visual. See, so here we have our linear functions. So this is like the worksheet kind of thing. Yeah, this is the one that I had gone to before. But other than that, just to give you an idea further, these are the formative assessments. The problem-solving task and the virtual manipulative is a student resource. So you click on these, you'll find these here and here. So if you want to click on each individual one of these to see what it is, that's fine, but just know that these are shortcuts to get to the information. This helps the virtual manipulative is an additional resource for students who are having difficulty in understanding the relationship between X and Y. So this is an interactive simulation. It takes you away from CPALMS and you go to a different site, and you're able to plug in and play with your X and Y values and look at what happens to the graph. And then the parent resources are going to be a mirror of what the student one's going for this particular standard. Okay, so each standard is going to have related resources. Some of them will have videos, some of them will not, some of them will have worksheets, but like I said, when you go into the lesson plans, you're going to have your PDFs within each one, or documents that are going to be available just to kind of play around and see what works for you and what works for your student. The assessments are helpful just so that you can have an idea. You can also check to see if your child is doing the work and or you're not sure if they're doing the work. Give them the assessment. Check let's see their knowledge and and see if they understand it, because it's always good to know. And see they're giving other things that they can look at. So this one doesn't necessarily have any kind of documents. It just has a link to go somewhere. So this is going to take you away from CPALMS. So this, I would suggest, if you have the option to open it up into a different tab, make sure that you do that. You can right click it, but most of the times in CPALMS, when you click it, it's gonna take you, as you notice, it opened up another tab. So you can close that out. All right. So if we go into our standards, you have access to all of the subject areas. If you go into course, and you have access points, models, assessments, so you have all these things available too. When you go into course, you have course descriptions. So if you're not sure where your student is or what it is that you need to look at, graduation requirements, you can look at that, course reports, and all these things. You can look at resources. These resources, as it says, is vetted by peers and experts, so you can further expand, which I believe it's just the same thing. I don't think that there's anything different other than the text is in a different color. Oh wait, it is slightly different. Okay, so we have different schools. You have educational games. Okay, you can look at formative assessments. Okay, expert. Look at your videos. So these are going to have more lessons or reinforcing. Let's look at teaching idea. So we have the KROS Pacific Ocean Kayak Journey overview, so you can do that. There are tutorials. So if you have some reservations on your ability to really comprehend the information well enough to teach your student, you can go here. Especially if you're a little rusty and it's been a while since you've had to, you know, do sine, cosine, or tangent. I'm learning my way around scientific calculators myself because certain ones I never learned on a scientific calculator, but now some of the TI calculators out there, you have to input the information differently. So I suggest getting scientific calculators that your students are, or that your child is using, or your student is using, and look to see, do some test problems using sine and cosine to see how you're supposed to input that. Student center, so this is going to give you adding and subtracting polynomials, solving quadratics by taking the square root. So these are some additional resources. So this is something to look to if you need to. It also provides you with the same tabs or similar tabs as your standards, but you have your STEM reading resources, STEM videos. So you have, if you are in an IB school or you're in a magnet program, I would say if you're in, especially if you're dealing with STEM, take a good look at some of these resources and see if this might be a way for you to beef up the workload a little bit, because usually these are going to be activities or ways to introduce the topics and understand them in a different way. Or I would say in that third aspect of the syllabus, the application portion of it, get familiar with some of these. You just click on them and it takes you to the videos themselves, and then you can just look at what's available, and it's going to tell you what the videos are, ratios. So this is the science, technology, engineering, math. So you have all these grouped together. And this is only one of 24. So you probably will be very successful. It's off, you know, by grade level and everything. So if you want to sort the information by grade, you can do so, or by subject. Okay, so you have those options available to you. Subject collections would be if you had specific areas that you want to put a cornerstone in, then I would say, like if you're looking at algebra, you want to just, if you click this, it's only going to leave the connections to algebra available. So here we have it, 9 to 12, see? And it's now just 1 out of 3 pages. And this is 20 on a page. So you have other resources available to you. If you have any other questions or concerns, please let me know. I went a little longer than anticipated, but I wanted to be detailed enough that you'd be able to go back to this video and look at things, pause it, see where I am, follow along if you need to, or click on things and take the time to look at things individually. But hopefully this was helpful. I hope that this is something that you'll be able to use and engage with your child with, and maybe this will be something that will help in the future as well. If you're getting confused or you're not sure what to do, or you need to, you know, quickly figure out what this subject is or what's being asked of your student because you're confused based on the work that's given, you can always come here to see and identify what the teacher's trying to accomplish and based on the work that's being given. So I will have actual lessons from here on out that are going to be specific to the standards, but I want to also inform you that I'm going to be doing just general basic things because I, as a tutor, have found some very interesting work, or I should say understandings that students had of what the teacher was asking, and by all means, how I understand things doesn't necessarily mean that it's from a student who was 100% paying attention in class. I'm fully aware that if a student's absent and they're getting notes from someone who didn't take proper notes, then that's going to be a condition that is out of their control. Also, I know that teachers, if they're out and they have a substitute in, it's really hard for students to gain an understanding in a particular discipline based on the information that's provided without the proper instruction going on. So I'm just going to do videos on commonly misunderstood or not covered or needs to be reviewed because of information misunderstandings happening within math and reading and writing. I just see a lot of issues that come up for a whole host of different reasons that are out of the student's control, sometimes out of the teacher's control too, if they have a substitute that's there in their stead and they had an unanticipated family emergency and was not able to really take the time that they needed or intended to do to give the necessary information. So I'm going to post this on the YouTube site, KC Kite, and then I'm going to put this on Facebook.